All right. Boom. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down the security rabbit hole to another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. I am Raph. Over that way is Jim. Down below me is James. That away, that's Julian. We'll get to him in a second, but we are recording this, obviously as the new year has started. Welcome to 2026 for the, umpteenth time. I'm sure you've heard that before from everybody, but thanks for joining us back here on the podcast. It was a great holiday break. We had a couple of good episodes. I really do hope you got a chance to listen to the one that I reposted with a little bit of commentary from Dan Gear. That episode is about as timeless as you're going to get on podcasts. Honestly, you could listen to that one in 10 years, and I would bet my career on the fact that it would still be as timely in 10 years as it was. Good God. Has it been 12 years since that?
It's got to be close. I mean, episode 100 had to have been.
So it was July. Yeah, it was
ago,
July
right?
2014. So
yeah, 2014.
11 and a half years.
Yeah.
Holy cow. And sadly, none of his advice changes. I'll let you go back and listen to that episode. But this one is all about third-party testing. And I've once again, Bugcrowd's been kind enough to lend me one of their folks for a bit. Hey, Julian, welcome to the show. Give us a little bit of background, and then we'll go.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Raph. Jim, James, nice to meet you all. So I'm Julian Brownlow-Davies. I'm the SVP of offensive security strategy at Bugcrowd. So I've spent about 20 years working mostly in offensive security. So for a number of the bigger consultancies around the world in the US, UK, and Australia. So I've seen a bit. And while I'm here at Bugcrowd, I'm all about helping us evolve a more modern approach. You know, you'll probably be aware that offensive security has kind of not changed for 20 odd years, and it needs to start catching up. And that's what we're all about doing at Bugcrowd, and what I'm here to help do.
I'm willing to bet that some of those techniques from 20 years ago still work. So while there may be a lot to catch up on, I'm pretty sure you're still fairly close to the curve there.
I think a lot of the technical techniques are much the same, but
fair enough.
What's happened is the customer problem's changing, right? And I think one of the challenges of the OffSec industry has been that it's all about the pen test. It's all about the vulnerability discovery, and it's not really about trying to solve the customer problem. And that's one of the things we're trying to do.
And we enter pet peeve land, full speed. I like it. Julian doesn't screw around. He's just gonna hit all of our buttons, like just mash the big red buttons. All right, let's go. So. Listen, I think offensive security is a great thing. I think all about the pen tests. I feel like that's a song that somebody did once and it just stuck around. Pen testing's a great. I've always thought pen testing was a great idea after you've done at least a few things.
Yeah.
Because I've watched people. I've watched several CISOs that I know that do this repeatedly. They join a company and they hire a third-party company to go pen test their stuff. It turns out it's awful. Surprise. And there's always the question of, are you measuring the security of the organization or the intelligence of the pen testers? We have some standards now, PTES and some of the other things coming from Nickerson and crew. So there's a lot to be talked about. However, what is the I'll start on maybe someplace else than I thought we were going to, but maybe let's talk offensive state of the art. Like what is the like, I don't know, what am I asking here? What is the current trend? Like what's going on? What's new in offensive security? I swear to God, if you say AI, I'm going to hang up.
I mean, I think that's part of the challenge. Is that there isn't anything that new in offensive security. There's a much greater move towards whole of organization testing with red teaming. But again, you have that challenge of new CISO comes in, orders the red team, usually it's to get more budget, right? It's not to find out how exposed they are, because they know they're exposed, right? It's often about getting more budget. But increasingly we are seeing organizations looking, and this kind of plays into the prioritization point we were talking about previously, is that it's about what are real exposures, not vulnerabilities. We've got bazillions of them and bazillions of ways of finding more vulnerabilities, and we can score them however we like. We can look at exploitability, and we can look at our KEVs and so on. But really, what matters is the exposure that the organization has. So is it reachable? But also, what is behind that exploitable vulnerability, right? Is it a crown jewel, or is it a brochureware website that a bit of defacement doesn't matter to, and that sort of thing? So as we look at sort of whole of organization testing, I think that's where the more mature organizations are going these days. Pen testing, I blame PCI. It's still done every year. It's still done, if you're lucky, after every change. We know it's not frequent enough. Everyone's talking about continuous pen testing, but no one really knows what continuous pen testing means. Is that my pen tester starting again when he finishes? That sounds really expensive. Good for the pen test companies. Is it something different? Is it using more automated tooling around attack surface discovery, vulnerability discovering, and then deploying humans to pen test as events occur, as changes occur? There are lots of different definitions of that, and I think that's one of the challenges that we're seeing in offensive.
I think that the challenge we see too, right, is this difference between pen testing and vulnerability assessments.
Oh God!
And let's be fair, 90% of the pen tests. 90% of the pen tests that you're paying for are vulnerability assessments. They are not pen tests.
There's something to be said for there. I definitely believe in the early days of pen testing, it was to prove a vulnerability had an impact. So this entire conversation, like Julian, you're highlighting the fact that, well, was it exposed to? What would be, that's where we started this game, right? 20 gazillion years ago. And now it comes all the way full circle to what James just said, is like, it's vulnerability testing on steroids.
Yeah, well, Jim, the reason it changed was 20 years ago, it was super easy to find a vulnerability that would walk you into any organization on any website. And as much as people want to say things haven't changed, that is not true today.
That's true.
That
is
not
a
just
true truism. Yes.
You're not just picking a bank website and saying, you know what, I can SQL inject this thing. No problem. I'm into it. 20 years ago, I would have bet every bank website out there you could have walked straight through front door, right? Like that. It's a whole different story. So now it's hard to find these ones that are actually exploitable to walk through. And if you're finding it, it's not SQL injection. It's not the ones that we saw before. Now you're talking about serialization issues. You're talking about things that are harder for people to actually understand and do. And I think that's why you see, it's easy to do an automated scan and here's some findings.
Well, I think, also, let's be honest, simple vulnerabilities on websites are not how people get hacked, right?
Right.
People get hacked through human exposures or complex chains of exploited vulnerabilities. And good pen testers are doing that. And of course, this is also where red teaming, it extends into red teaming. The problem we've had is organizations, is literally the PCI, the PCI Council. I shouldn't blame them too loudly, because they also helped generate the industry of pen testing. But it's compliance-led pen testing that's changed the industry, right? It's I must do this. Because I must do it, I go for the cheapest resource I can find, and then you get vulnerability, a fancy vulnerability discovery. Now, some of the consultancies I've worked for in the past are the big names, the top end of the spectrum, that have that hire really good pen testers. They've all got the highest level of CREST accreditation. They don't follow checkbox methodologies, and they are looking to exploitations together to get into to break into systems, right? And that still exists, but it's expensive because you're hiring expensive people. They take longer. And a salesperson says, well, it's going to take us 10 days to pen test this thing. And another company comes along and says it's going to take us 5 days, and we're going to use a resource in an offshore center that's half the price. And suddenly you get a vulnerability assessment.
Can I steer us? Because this is an interesting conversation. I'm going to steer us because we've done at least three that in the recent past, starting with Rob Hansen and we had a couple of the guests on that talked through this, but finding vulnerabilities and bugs in code, there is no shortage of talent out there doing that, right? And James, I get your point. Individual stuff like wide open front doors don't really exist that much anymore in reputable enterprise. But the average company you're finding internally has hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands more vulnerabilities that they need to prioritize and fix, patches they need to apply, stuff they need to do. Okay, cool. Along comes a red team exercise and says, here's 1,700 more, or here's 50 more, here's 10 more, here's 6 more, whatever that. How do you, given the state of the world and the resources, and obviously we're in a post, I don't know what to call it, but we're in a post security hype world, I think, right? Where the hype we created, the hype we created around security has evaporated pretty heavily. And now we're asked to justify budgets like every other department. We're being asked to right size and explain why we want something, what risk is it reducing, by how much, and all that stuff. How do you are you seeing any prioritization issues? Are you seeing prioritization getting better? And James, I get it. So for those of you guys watching or listening, you don't see this. We have a little chat going here as we go. And James says, "I hope we wouldn't find 50 more vulnerabilities on a red team." Fair point. But if you find 1 or 2, right, are those then the top things that the company needs to fix, or those go into the top pile? Like, how does that work with the customers you guys work with? How do they prioritize?
Yeah, so I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. This is the exact problem, right? We don't need more vulnerabilities. We need to know where our exposures are. We're not looking for, looking for signal in the noise is no longer the problem. It's looking for meaning in the signal. And for us, for us, that means it means putting proper context around it. So it's about, in a red team assessment, we'll be graphing the attack surface. So not just the assets in the attack surface, but the connectivity between the attack surface. We'll be knowing where the crown jewels are. We'll be looking at those vulnerability signals and being able to look at where are the choke points, right? And that's your priority. Your priority is fixing the vulnerability that's going to shut down 5 attack paths to critical assets, right? Rather than the CVSS 10 that is gatekeeping a brochureware website, right? So it's about bringing in the context. It's about bringing in the context of the organization, the controls that are in place, the attack surface in a dynamic way, and not just, as I say, not just the list of assets. And it's about understanding the TTPs of threat actors, which is, again, what a red team is doing. So it's bringing one of your previous guests, I can't remember which one it was saying, was, there are only a certain number of ways that a threat actor is behaving, and we kind of know what those all are, or the insurance companies do, I think was the comment that he didn't share.
Yeah, that was I think that. So the first in that series was Rob talking about the fact that the way we CVE, CVSS, all those things, the scoring systems are fundamentally borked and broken, and none of it really makes sense except for whoever's agenda it's feeding. Okay, we had Jay Jacobs on, who actually gave me a much brighter, gave me some hope in this. What you're adding additional context to this. So if you have a red team exercise and you get a set of you get an attack path, which gives you a set of failures in your controls, right? Or open vulnerabilities you have, maybe both. And that can be used in conjunction, but not aside from the vulnerability pile you have accumulated of things that you need to patch.
Yeah.
To help maybe prioritize, but
yeah. And that's part of your graph, right? That's part of the attack path graph you're trying to create is the signals from the vulnerability, from your vulnerability management system. So where do I have vulnerabilities? What are they? And then when you look at the assets and the connectivity and the exposures that you can go through in an attack, that gives you that kind of prioritization. Now that's not something.
James,
sorry.
Yeah, because James, I think to your point, right? It's not just vulnerabilities out there that are out. That it's control failures.
Yeah,
and that's what the attack paths and goal oriented, right? Red teaming. That so you've got a goal, something you're trying to achieve, rather than just shotgun approach of look, I found vulns because yay, so did everybody else.
Yeah, it really is vulns, to be honest. You know, it's overprivileged system accounts. It's you know, it's a lack of least privilege across across an infrastructure. It's those kinds of things. Or it's abuse. It's chained abuse of privileged individuals, right? So particularly when you look at social engineering, it's not necessarily the person you socially engineer first. It's how you get them, who are then a trusted individual, to engineer further down the chain.
Interesting.
I think a key difference too, and I don't know, Julian, maybe you can give a good example of this, but maybe people listening might be wondering, what's that difference between red teaming, pen testing, vulnerability assessment? You have to detail about it, but there's a clear difference between red teaming and pen testing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people confuse those and they see the same. And that's why I think, Raph, when you said the 1,000 vulnerabilities, I'm like, listen, if your red team's giving you 1,000 vulnerabilities, you need to boot them right out the door.
Yeah.
Because that, you know what I mean? Like that's not even a pen test. That's not the goal of a pen test. A vuln assessment will do that, right? Pen test gets a little bit more specific. Red team gets even more like scoped into what your actual goals are for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're 100% correct. Just as 20 years ago, there was a confusion between what a pen test was and a vulnerability assessment was. And as Raph said, we may maybe come full circle. There is a confusion between, there can be a confusion between pen test and red team, right? And, you know, you certainly see organizations talking about their red team, as in the attackers, right? Not the blue team, the red team. And they'll be doing offensive security, which could, and often is, just pen testing. The worst thing that's happened is this whole rise of AI red teaming, which, you know, whilst testing of AI is important, calling it red teaming is somewhat painful for my red team. To do real red teaming. So, but you know, real red teaming is it's for a start, it's usually covert, or you know, it's at least covert to most of the organization. Will often, you know, there's usually a control group, of course, within the organization that is able to watch over, steer, enable at times, and so on and so forth. Secondly, it's goal orientated, right? It's whole of organization, or it's bounded in sort of organizational terms rather than within. You know, you don't red team an app, you red team the external. You might be an external breach, right? You might be trying to simulate external breach. I might be trying to simulate an insider threat. So I might start with a trusted account and not have to break in from the outside. But it's about trying to obtain actions on target, maintain perseverance within a system, it's essentially simulating what real threat actors are trying to do. We're trying to exfiltrate data. We're trying to break confidentiality, integrity, or availability. Obviously, we try not to break any of those things, particularly not availability, but prove that can be done within a red team assessment. And you know, and again, it's bounded by what the rules of engagement rather than the scope. So it might include social engineering, and it, you know, many red teams I've been involved in the past include physical social engineering, like literally trying to blag your way into a data center and plug in, or it might be bounded by only you know, technical exploitations. Can we get remote code exploitation and that sort of thing?
Julian, am I incorrect in your opinion in making a distinction between vulnerabilities, the type that we normally associate with scanning, like missing patches, misconfigurations, that kind of thing, and control failures, which is more, Jim, I think this is something we probably kind of old school in this nature, right? A control failure where you've got you don't have a missing patch, you have it's a wetware problem, or a you know, or an alert is detected but nobody goes to answer it, or it's simply an EDR solution that's in detect only mode and not block, right? Am I incorrect in making that distinction when I look at this? Because I think in my mind, you've got the vulnerabilities that exist, the things that I can go patch. I can create a configuration, updated configuration, apply a patch, whatever. And then there's control failures, which is a little bit more squishy to me. It's like we were able to bypass all your correctly configured security parameters by asking the front desk admin to install this thing or run this up to somebody, this flash drive up, because it was important, and said, don't worry about it, click bypass security, allow this because trust us, we're IT people, we know what we're doing. Like, is there a difference, or the way people think, or am I missing it?
No, I think I mean, we would still think about them as vulnerabilities. We probably would never call them vulns, because vulns has a particular understanding within the AppSec world, right? But they're vulnerabilities that are exploitable and can become exposures. So you've got this line of things. So you know, we would think about it. May not be a CVE attached to it, but it's still a vulnerability if your help desk is willing to hand out passwords, right? Or you know, whatever that control weakness is. But they can be everything from, you know, like I said earlier, overprivileged service accounts, or, you know, the weak conditional access, this sort of thing, which again is not a vuln, but it is a vulnerability. And when it's you know, if it's sat in some shadow of SaaS and there's agents that can talk to it, it suddenly becomes really bad exposure.
I don't think necessarily, Raf. I mean, you said control failures. I'd see it more as control gaps.
Okay.
And that's a lot more of what we're looking for. I mean, I always look at that like a pen test. Like, a pen test is not just to try and find vulnerabilities, it's to confirm to me, are the controls that I think that are in place, are they working like they should be? And are there ones that are missing that should be there? It's less about the missing patches or the vulnerabilities found, but more so of confirmation of what do I think I'm doing? Am I doing it? And if I'm not, where can I improve to do that?
It's a critically important distinction, because I believe a lot of people are thinking in terms of vulns, to Julian's point, right?
Right.
And I don't think people are thinking in the scenarios, do I have the right controls? And the ones that I believe are there, are they doing it? And we've had conversations where it kind of like the click button approach to security, right? Well, I highlighted that, I checked that checkbox, and that means it's working, right? And so I think there's a big part. So I guess to say is I completely agree 100% is that a vulnerability is where a threat can use that as a means of doing something that you don't want done.
But it's usually a missing control or a control gap, right? I mean, you think about, like, from the control perspective, like my endpoint security, I believe that because I have EDR on there that I'm covered for this. I have a red team exercise that says, hey, test my laptop. Show me where this is not covering me because I think it does this. They can show you, oh, it's not covering here, here, and here. And then I can go back and say, did I think it was actually doing this piece? Yes or no? Oh, no, this EDR tool doesn't do that. I need something over here that would actually, right? Like, so I'm validating the controls that I believe I have or should have, and then identifying the ones that will cover that missing piece.
And also it's about synthesizing them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we run out of time, as I wanted to, this could be a longer conversation too, but I know I mentioned, I mentioned in our original kind of, when we were planning this, I did want to talk about, like, God help me, agentic AI, and both, because we did an episode on this recently with a gentleman identified a bunch of agents on ServiceNow platform that you could effectively get them to, like, subvert them to do all kinds of unholy things. When you guys, like, from a red teaming, offensive security, when you look at agentic AI, there's two ways to look at it. One, agents doing red teaming, offensive security work, right? That's one. And then the other one is actually testing those agentic platforms. I want to try to cover both, but can we start on, do you guys, is there use for AI, particularly like the agentic stuff in red teaming, offensive security kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think of AI as three things: a tool, a target, and a threat, right? So it's all of a tool, a target, and a threat. It's all of those things. Today, as a tool, bug hunters are using it in varying different ways. Some from pretty much firing and forgetting, and others to co-piloting as they look for bugs. So there's no question that, and ourselves and some of the other bounty platforms are seeing increasing amount of submissions that might come from directly out of the AI tooling itself. But I think there's a wider spread use of AI than those that are trying to get the tools to, LLMs to submit submissions for them. There's use of it as in the same way we've always used automation in testing, right? Since the days of Nessus and Burp Suite and what have you, automation is an important part of it. So an AI is part of that. In terms of agentic offensive security, we're clearly seeing a massive rise in it. I mean, be blind if you haven't seen Expo and all of their marketing over the last few months or year or so now. And there is definitely a use case. When we talked earlier about continuous pen testing, if we want to get to a world of continuous pen testing,
I was going to ask,
this is the only way we're really going to get to it. But the question is, where does the human in the loop come, right?
That's it right there.
It's our firm belief that human in the loop is an essential part of this, right? So agentic AI gives you machine speed coverage, right? We can go further and faster. We can't go deeper, right? You don't want to let an AI go too deep. You wouldn't want an AI trying to do a covert red team. It could break everything, right? You need human judgment for risk assessment. You need human judgment for levels of ingenuity, but particularly for that risk assessment, in my mind. You go around dropping a table in your pen test with an agent, you're in trouble. A human knows not to press that button because what will happen next. And so with an agentic offensive AI tooling, you're going to dumb it down a little bit so that it isn't going to break things, which means you're still going to need that human to go further into the loop. And a lot of people talk about augmenting humans with AI, but I kind of like to think about it the other way around and having humans augment the AI, right? So the AI does the hard work, it does the legwork, it does the grunt work, and the humans come in over the top and give it the, imagine a kind of an attack chain approval where the AI says, I really want to do this, but it looks dodgy. And the human's the one that can say, yes, you can go forward with that, or no, change the payload, make it do this instead. So I like the idea of thinking about augmenting AIs with human rather than augmenting humans with AI, but it's much the same.
That's an interesting distinction, because I think in the course of the last year, we've heard a lot, and we've talked accidentally or on purpose, talked about AI quite a bit. And we even had a SOC conversation around this, right? Is it the agent, the computer augmenting the human, or is the human augmenting the computer? You're making a pretty good case for the human being the augmenter here, and the computer being the base case. That's interesting. That's the first time I think I've heard that said, especially in this context.
Yeah,
there was just some story I saw. I don't remember. I saw it today though. It was about some company using AI to do their development, and the AI went against all the guidelines and deleted their production database, and did all this stuff, and they're freaking out about it. Apparently whoever created the AI has now put more guidelines in to help guardrails to stop it from doing that. But that's exactly right. And I mean, we've seen it with human pen testers and security assessors as well. How many stories that didn't make the news of a pen tester doing something that took a site down, deleted a database. People, when they first learned SQL injection and do that update, with no where clause, and then all of a sudden they've updated the entire data. You know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of things. I got to imagine AI is going to follow suit and do some of that stuff.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is exactly right. And I think this also circles back to that whole conversation about vulnerability assessment versus pen test, right? I think those people that believe a fully autonomous AI solution can do a pen test are the same people that think a pen test is a vulnerability assessment, right? Because you're using apart from anything else, you're mostly using base model training, right? Yeah, you can load some RAG into it and so on and so forth. But the base model training, the LLMs, the Anthropic and OpenAI, they're training on internet data. There's no real tradecraft there, right? The tradecraft is not available to the frontier models today. And so a large part of the challenge with autonomous AI-led pen testing is giving it that tradecraft, giving it that fine-tuning and the RAG data that's going to enable it to act more like a human, and trying to think more about, well, how do humans work rather than how do agents work when testing is another thing that we're kind of trying to grapple with when we think about this problem. But at the end of the day, it's a long time, we think, before you're going to be able to go to the depth of a high-quality human bug hunter or pen tester.
Listen, Julian, I suspect that the same people that are selling you fully automated pen testing are backed by the same VC firm that funded the you don't need developers, just use AI. Same people.
I suspect so.
Both are wrong for the exact same reason. But follow the money anyway. So I wanted, before we dodged out, because we're getting really short on time here. I like where this conversation is going, and I really, by the way, I had to go look up AI RAG because you guys kept talking about it, and I've heard the term before, but retrieval augmented generation, that's an interesting concept. I don't know if everybody on the that's a listener is familiar with it. It's like basically, okay, you want to explain it, because I probably will do a crap job.
Yeah, so it's essentially about providing context to the agent. So the agent, an agent is using its base model learning, the training that OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever have given to their models, and the fancy pattern matching, word pattern matching that it does. And by providing RAG data, as it does its pattern matching, it's retrieving the augmented data that you're providing it, which gives it more context, and it can be weighted differently. So the RAG data can be really important or it can be not so important. And you can talk about kind of the temperature of the RAG data there, and it enables the agent to kind of bias the way it works based upon the data that you're feeding it. So you're feeding it additional information.
That's good. I feel like we need to give that context because as you guys were talking about, I'm like, wait a minute, I've heard that term. So hopefully that helps out. Hey, one last final thought, because I keep coming back to that XKCD cartoon with the single frame that talks about like how all the enterprise software is underpinned by like one open source project that somebody stopped maintaining 10 years ago. There's been some recent hubbub. What's that?
And then Cloudflare got stuck in there recently as well.
There's been some good versions of that lately. It's been excellent.
Yeah, there's been some really good ones. The security of critical open source projects that are used in tons of enterprise software and pop up in security solutions, a pop up in webs. Uh-oh, you got lights go off. Now you've done it. You haven't moved in a long enough time. That's awesome. Yeah.
We've all been in that office, have we not?
We've all been in that office. You've been sitting there too long and the lights go off. So look, the security of these critical open source projects, oft forgotten open source projects, oft neglected. And it's great that enterprise companies can come to a bug bounty program, external third-party testing, all this stuff. But open source doesn't have that luxury because there's no money behind it. How do we, and frankly, when you find a bug in open source stuff, like who do you go to? Like if Mike, in Outer Mongolia, although it probably wouldn't be Mike, but whatever, in Outer Mongolia is maintaining this project and like that person stops responding, like what do we do?
It's a challenge.
Let's end on an easy one, right?
It's a challenging question. I mean, there are lots of enterprises that are happy to pay for bugs in their open source software if it's affecting them. Right. So if you find an enterprise with that open source framework and it's in their attack surface and in scope of their bounty program, then they will pay for that, and they will also submit the bug to the open source project. There are vulnerability disclosure programs and all that sort of thing as well, though. So yeah, it's there are challenges, but at the end of the day, the maintainer groups don't have, often don't have the cash to pay a bounty. So it's as an open source organization, you're looking for responsible disclosure rather than paying bounties.
I think the interesting graph too is what's critical. Right.
Yeah,
you set out to create some sort of library or component that other people can use. It's not the left function. It wouldn't be considered a critical function. And nobody would have thought of that until the guy pulled it off of the repos and all of a sudden everything broke because everybody referenced it. Right. But it's hard to know criticality of it, for one. And also, I think the other side of it is all the stuff that we talk about, compliance and guidelines and requirements, does not apply to open source packages that are sitting out there. I mentioned this in our chat. You probably missed it because our chats are super long. But I was reading through the Software Security Code of Practice, which is put out by somebody, Department of Science, Innovation, and Technology, something. And they've got a specific section in there that lists out like who the software guidelines go to. And for open source developers and maintainers, this code of practice is not consider them as a primary audience. So like we put out guidelines, we put out requirements, but everybody that's writing any little piece of component that could be used by anybody doesn't fall under any of those.
Yeah.
I am baffled.
Critical, when we find incidents of critical vulnerability critical vulnerabilities in open source packages that are widely deployed. What you actually see is the bug hunters submitting them to multiple enterprise customer programs, and there will be different payouts because the criticality will then be different for each enterprise customer. To James's point, right? It depends on how you're using that package as to whether that's a P1 or a P3 or whatever, right?
That feels like cheating in a really weird way. Really weird way. It's a way to get paid 20 times to find one bug, although you're right, it means different things to different people.
But that's what you see. That's the trick to it.
POC, yeah, and you've got to write the POC in each environment. So you've got to
prove fair enough.
It's not just demonstrating a bug. You've got to prove that there's exploitability.
But something Raf, like a React to shell.
Yeah. Well,
if you find that, like, what a gold mine, because you're going to hit every site you can possibly find and file bug bounties for every one of those sites.
But there's a race on as well. So everyone's doing it.
That's right.
Also, there's also a race from the program owners to put it into non-applicable because we're finding it ourselves, right? So as soon as those things go live, our triage team are absolutely smashed from React for Shell. Or back in the day of Log4j, that nearly killed them because there's so many submissions, and everyone has to be triaged because not every POC, not every proof of exploitability is valid.
But I think that's an important point, Raf, to what you were talking about, prioritization, right? We can go sit here and identify a critical vulnerability in some library, but as we know, with third-party components, 1 out of every million users of that library is actually vulnerable to that vulnerability. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
The prioritization becomes difficult because it is situational. Maybe I use React, but I'm not vulnerable to React to Shell. Yeah. But everybody else is, but it's still in the tool. It's critical.
That's right. It's back to the vulnerability, exploitability and exposure problem, right? There's just because you have that open source package, it may not be vulnerable, it may not be exploitable, and it may not be exposed, or it may be 1, 2, or 3 of those things. And that's how you pay on it based on the damage it does.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, this feels like a good place to end this episode. We've covered a metric crap ton of ground. If you saw me writing, that's because I try to remember like parts of an episode, like your thing about signal and noise, and in context, that's a good one. And the fact that you think of agentic as a tool, a target, and a threat, that's a really good one. And then humans in the loop is another. So I got 3 little gold nuggets out of at least I can pull out and folks can digest. But thanks for joining the show, giving us a little bit of your time and insights. I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome, and thanks for your time as well. It's been good to chat.
Hey, thanks to the Bug Crowd folks for again dedicating a little bit of your time and allowing us to put this episode out. James, Jim, thanks for joining, guys. This has been another one where I had to go Google something because I didn't know it before, and I got a whole bunch of new context. This is my favorite type of episode, and I hope you guys listening enjoy this as much as I do, because learning is often disguised as fun in these conversations, and I can't think of a better way to do it.
Go.
All right, Julian, thanks for joining. We'll catch you guys another time, another place on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast, where we'll have just as much infotaining stuff as we do now. We'll catch you later. Cheers. Bye-bye.